Dear students, today I will teach you a poem, a photograph by Toulson. First about the poet. The poet was born on 20th May 1924 in Britain. She died at the age of 94. She was a poet, teacher, educational journalist and editor. This poem is about the poet's mother. The poet recalls her mother when she looks into an old photograph. She describes a photograph in 3 stages. In the first stage, the photograph shows the poet's mother standing at the beach enjoying a holiday with her 2 cousins. She was 12 or so at the time. The second stage takes us 20 or 30 years later. The mother would laugh at the way she and her cousins, Betty and Dolly, were dressed up for the occasion. In the third stage, the poet remembers her mother with a heavy heart. The photograph revives nostalgic feelings in the poet. Now, starting the poem, pay attention to the words and phrases used in the poem and their significance. The cardboard shows me how it was when the 2 girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and see the big girl, some 12 years or so. The cardboard. Cardboard is a stiff board, stiff and very thick paper board which gives support to a photograph. Shows me how it was when the 2 girl cousins went paddling. The poet saw an old photograph and she saw that in this photograph the 2 girl cousins went paddling, each one holding my mother's hands. She saw in the photograph 3 girls, her mother and her 2 cousin sisters, means her mother's 2 cousin sisters. They were in the photograph. And see the big girl. She is referred to his mother, each one holding one of my mother's hands. And after then, see the big girl. She means her mother, some 12 years or so, means the picture was snapped when her mother was 12 years old. So it was very old photograph, and the photograph was snapped even before the birth of the poet. All 3 stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. Now, where was the photograph taken? And what was in the photograph? All 3 stood still. Still means without any movement, to smile through their hair. They were smiling, their hair was scattered over their face. At the uncle with the camera means who took their photograph? Their uncle. Actually, the line tells us that they were at the sea beach. If you look at the second line, you find when the 2 girl cousins went paddling, means it was the scene of sea beach, and the photograph was taken long before the poet's birth. At that time, her mother and her mother's 2 cousin sisters, they went to the sea beach to celebrate sea holiday. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born. When this photograph was taken, her mother's age was 12 years. So she looks at her mother's face and she finds that it was a sweet face. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, and the sea where they were standing, in the picture and in reality also, there is very little change in the sea. And it looks to have very little change in it, because the things which are present in the nature, they are permanent. Mountains, rivers, waterfalls, they are permanent. Was their terribly transient feet? The poet saw that the feet of these girls were washed by the sea, terribly transient. It is an example of alliteration also, the repetition of consonant sound in the conjugative, in the beginning of the conjugative words. Terribly, T, transient, T is the beginning of the word, T, T sound. So this is an example of alliteration. Alliteration is a poetic device. The repetition of the consonant sound at the beginning of the words which come conjugatively. Terribly transient feet. Transient, momentary, which are not lasting, which are mortal, ephemeral. So transient feet refers to the poet's mother and her two cousin sisters, because they had grown in the years and now they were no more also. So, but the sea was there. Sea is permanent, sea is immortal, while human beings are mortal. So in the photograph, their feet were washed by the water of the sea. So in the first stanza, we come to know about the childhood of the poet's mother, and there are examples of transient feet, stood still. These are examples of alliteration. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. Now the poet tells us that after 20-30 years later, her mother laughed at the snapshot. What happens when we look at our old photographs? We smile, we laugh, because our appearance, our behavior, and our manner of walking, talking, and dressing is quite different from the present time. So she laughed at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she would say, and look how they dressed us for the beach, the sea holiday. Means her mother remembered her past, she remembered her childhood, and told the poet that how their parents dressed them for the sea holiday. See Betty and Dolly, actually these are the names of the cousin sisters of her mother's cousin. Betty and Dolly are the cousins of her mother. So the poet's mother tell poet how they were dressed by their parents at that time for sea holiday. In the next lines, the poet feels sad, or she shows her grief. Was her past, mine is her laughter. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter. The poet says she regrets, she feels that sea holiday was the past of her mother, because her mother saw the photograph. It was her past. She saw the photograph in which they had gone for sea holiday. And mine is her laughter. And the poet, what is the poet's past? When her mother laughed looking at the photograph. Means the poet's mother remembered her childhood looking at the photograph, and at present the poet remembers her mother's laughter when she smiled to look at the photograph. So both lie with the labored age of loss. So both of them lost something. Her mother lost her childhood that time, and now the poet had lost her mother herself. So both lie is actually twist with pain, expression of very sad, rye with labored ease of loss. So labored ease is an example of oxymoron. Two opposite words are put together. Labored ease, sweet, bitter like. So in the same way, labored ease, labored means which is achieved by very difficulty, very hard, with a very hard work, something which is achieved by very hard work. So on the one hand, we are talking about the very hard work, very tiresome work, and ease is comfort, means both of them tried very hard to become comfortable of this loss. Both tried to compromise with their loss. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. And of this circumstance, there's nothing to say at all. It's silence, silences. Again, silence, silences is an example of alliteration. Poetic device. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. And of this circumstance, there's nothing to say at all. Means the poet is very sad and she remembers that now she was as many years dead as she lived, means almost 12 years had passed. And of this circumstance, the circumstance of her mother's death, there is nothing to say at all, means the poet has no explanation or had no explanation what the effect of her mother's death had been on her. Its silence, silences means because death is silence and the poet has nothing to explain, so it silences. So death of her mother, the death of her mother makes her silent also. So this is all about the poem. I hope that you have learned, you have understood. Thanks for watching video. Have a nice day.